Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast,
a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Aniston, and this is Empowered Life. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Riekstins. I'm your host. And if you've listened to the show before, you know how much I love the process of being in this space. I get to attend events sometimes, whether I'm sitting in the room or whether I have the opportunity to be on stage to mingle, meet, connect, and ultimately collaborate with some of the greatest minds in the world today. And it is such a privilege for me to get to be in this space because I get to learn and absorb and be in proximity to some incredible, kind, powerful, but people that are creating shifts and changes out and in the universe. And today's guest, Erica Lippy, is one of those people. I recently had the privilege of meeting her at one of these said events, and I ran up to her and gave her a big hug and said, "It's so good to see you again," was literally my opening line because I felt like I already knew her. And she's like, "So good to finally meet you, but we've never met before." And I bring that right up front because this is the energy of how Erica shows up. You're going to get to meet her in a few moments' time and you're going to feel like you've known her forever. Her content is connecting to the very essence of who you are as a reminder of the divinity that is flowing to you and through you. Erica Lippy is an integrative life and wellness coach. She is an entrepreneur. She's also the host of the top 1% globally recognized Passion, Love, and Pursuit podcast, which I mentioned I had the privilege of being on recently. You've got to go and check out the episode. I've had so much feedback just from people that have messaged me saying, "Oh my God, she's amazing," just in the snippets that I had been sharing. And so I'm going to challenge you to dive into all things Erica Lippy today. Erica, firstly and foremost, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to have you on the Empowered Life podcast.
Rudi, it is such an honor. And I just want to second that and say that everybody must listen to Rudi's episode that recently released on Passion, Love, Pursuit podcast, because he dropped some massive wisdom. And as I was re-listening to it, I was so inspired and it gave me chills. Some of the things you said just really spoke to me, and I know it's going to speak to everybody. So encourage you to listen to that. But anyways, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Oh, I am so excited. This has been a long time coming. And so you ultimately connect people to the authentic self. You create and support people to find self-love, to have deeper connection, and ultimately to reinvigorate and or find passion and purpose. So my question to you is, what does that really mean to connect to your authentic self?
I think it is a mission we should all be on, is returning home to ourselves, because I think so many of us, and I speak, this is very much my journey. I think as we touched on in our conversation, so many of us seek outside validation, and that becomes the thing we strive to be like, how could I fit in? How could I be seen? How could I feel worthy? And by seeking that, we disconnect from who we truly are and innately in our worth. And so I just think it's so critical to receive or attract or give anything in life. We need to be our authentic self. And so I know it's a cliche word, but I feel it's a life mission that we should strive for, because that ultimately will attract everything we want in our life. And so that's why I think it's so important. And I know very much my journey was rediscovering myself and really questioning, like, who am I really? And how could I be more of her?
So let's go back to how you had to rediscover her. And I'm trying to use your terminology because I know your story and I don't want to spoil it for the unfolding for the audience. But, you know, today you are able to help and support people to achieve what I like to refer to as their highest and their greatest potential, where somebody recognizes who they are, why they're here, what they've come to do, and they wake up with vigor for literally everything in their life, whether it be good, bad, or ugly. They take it from where it is and they do something with it to move their lives forward. But you obviously weren't always this way. I would love for you to go and share a little bit of your story, and you're more than welcome to start anywhere in your story. But, you know, I think it's so important that people first hear of what was the qualification that got you to where you are today. Because, you know, I'm going to say this, and I say this with profound love, but you had a doozy of an upbringing when I look at just the emotional turmoil that you had to go through to be able to be so beautifully qualified to support people to go through what they're going through. Before I get you to tell your story, I want to preface, I work with a tremendous amount of people in, I want to say, high profile positions that have achieved a certain level of status or success in life. And now they're starting to feel like, man, I put all my self-worth in my business or in money or in a career, but I don't feel fulfilled. I feel something's missing. And I right now am working with 3 very powerful female leaders, and all 3 of them are saying, I just want love. I just want to be in love. I just want to find fulfillment in love. And, you're helping people connect to themselves. And I know they're going to be listening to this episode, and I know that you help people fall in love with themselves. I know that's not, the only thing you do, but I love your journey of falling in love with you. And so if you could give us a little context for the benefit of the audience, how did you lose yourself to find yourself?
Oh, that's so good. Well, first of all, I think everything we seek is already within us. And that was something I had to learn very much through the way I would like to share this is basically where my deepest pain came from. And then how I was able to discover that and really take a radical look at it and be honest and strip everything that was not who I was and all those stories that were limiting me. So a lot of my pain came in relationships, and I started dating at a very young age. So I was very impressionable. I started dating at age 11. Sounds kind of crazy, but I had a year-long relationship at age 11. But it was the relationship after that significantly impacted me. And it was from 13 to 23. And the guy I was dating was 3 years older. So he was 16 and I was 13. And that's a really vast age and difference when you talk about like growth. And so I didn't know who I was. I don't think any of us know who we are then, especially we're discovering ourselves. So I very much formed into what he liked. And I was becoming more like him in some way. Like he liked this, so I liked it. And it was like the path I was going on was just following him. Like he was the leader. And there was emotional abuse in that. So he was reconfirming, going back to my childhood, he was reconfirming a belief that I already had about myself. And that was that I was stupid and I wasn't smart enough and less than. And he just deeply imprinted that in me. But it was a belief that came from a learning disability that I had and discovered when I think I was age 10, if I could remember. And so this learning disability was auditory memory disorder. So it was basically, if something was said out loud, it was very hard for me to retain that information and then put it into short-term, long-term memory. And so I just always formed this belief, or I from there formed that belief that I just was stupid. And in that relationship, I just didn't, I think it just affected me so deeply because it reinforced a strong belief. And that carried for so many years into things I did, ways I would show up, just my lack of worthiness. And I didn't really realize it because I was just going about my days and in relationships and carrying forward. My whole purpose seemed to be that I sought love from somebody else. I needed other people to tell me I was worthy. I needed other people to tell me that I belonged. And fast forward, after I went through, I went into another long-term relationship for about 5 years. That was healthy and everything. But when that ended, all this pain like resurfaced and I realized that I loved him more than myself. And so there was always this void of this like self-love and worthiness. And when I started dating after that long-term relationship, if everybody's following along, I just kept on repeating the same thing over and over. Like, as they say in Sandy, like you're like different package, but same bow, right? So, or different, same package, different bow, basically. So I just kept on repeating the same result. And so that's when I finally took ownership and just really question, like, why does this keep happening? Instead of blaming everybody else and basically saying he's the cause for this, he doesn't want a relationship, or just all these stories, I instead started to really question, okay, why does this keep happening? I'm obviously the common denominator in this situation. What am I responsible of? Because we all are responsible for what the part we play in our own misery. And so I started to do that work. And that's when I went on this rediscovering who I was and letting go of those stories that really limited me. Because that really was what it was about, is these stories that I held on for so long. And so I'd enter every situation with that same belief.
So I want to dive in a little deeper, but before we do that, I just want to acknowledge everything that you've just said. And I want the audience to just know how beautifully in your power you were able to go back and talk about some of the most traumatic experiences, obviously, from your past. And, you know, you said they came through relationships, and I believe that all our pain really comes through relationships, and they're in different forms. Yours happened to be in love interests. And so for anybody listening, you started dating at 11 years old. It was a 1-year relationship. A year later, at 13, you went into a 10-year relationship. That one was toxic. It was very difficult. It was abusive. He reminded you constantly that you weren't good enough, you weren't worthy. We're going to dive in there a little deeper because I want the audience to get the depth of where you were to where you've gotten to, because I know there are people listening to this that either are at the depths right now, or they know someone, or even worse, they have a child that is going through this, and I want to be able to support them from all areas and avenues. But more than anything, I want to show them what does it look like to do the work and come out the other side. And so you're in that relationship for 10 years to 23. A few years go by, you enter a 5-year relationship. The relationship is mostly good, but when it ends, you realize it's the same package, different bow, and you love him more than you love yourself. I know that already. I've heard you say that before, and I wrote it down again. Wow, like what a profound statement to sit and listen to as you leave a relationship and you realize you love the relationship more than you love yourself. I mean, just how many people are in a position like that right now, where they love a job more than themselves? They love their car more than themselves. They love a relationship, a person, or something. And we started the episode talking about putting all this value in something, whereas we have all of what we want inside of ourselves. Now, I want to go back to your, I want to say formative years, you know, where you were dating somebody for 10 years. It was a really tough relationship. I know that you mentioned previously on different platforms that, you know, you really struggled emotionally with this. And at one point in time, 15 and a half years old, you actually considered suicide and you were tempted to take your life. I know that in that instance, you've spoken it into being a cry for help. But the reality was you did something so dramatic and wanting to be able to create that shift. And so I want to go back to that for a second, because, you know, we could hear, oh, you know, here's my son or my daughter is in a relationship. Oh, they're going through a tough time. That's what relationships are. And we just, you know, could pass them over. We could just brush it over as adolescents. But you were really, really struggling. What was that period like for you? And why was that a resort that you went to?
Oof, gosh. Yeah, let me bring myself back there. So I think because I put so much stock into that relationship, it became my identity, that relationship. If I really were to be honest, like if I look back, I believe I was very much, like I said, I was forming into him and what he likes. So my identity became that, right? And so when I think we broke up at one point after a year, if I can remember correctly, the timing, and that's what it was really hard. And I felt empty without him because it was just so much, again, we were so close and it was such a young part of my life. So we didn't know better. At least I didn't know better. And that's when I just lost and I got really depressed and I felt just empty inside. And so as I mentioned in previous podcasts, I attempted suicide at age, I believe it was 15 and a half. And luckily, my parents sent me to a home. I told them I wanted to go. It was for 2 weeks. And to be honest, I gained a lot of perspective during that time. And I think perspective is key because I think that's really what can transform the way when you see things differently, then you could make different actions, you have different emotions, different thoughts, as you speak about a lot, is that shift could really transform your life. And so that's what happened in that moment is I saw other people in this home and I realized they had it off worse than I did. So it made me really appreciate what I had, the family, the friends, and knowing that I was okay. Like I'm going to survive. I'm going to get past this. But I did take actions after that. I started to address my depression. I started to try therapy. I also took an anger management class, codependency class. Like I really started to take action. And luckily it was very much self-driven. And I think it's because that perspective that I had in that moment, being able to witness other people in their suffering and realizing I really didn't have it that bad and I'm going to survive. And as I always say, like all you have is within you. You just need to tap into that. And the only way you could tap into that is really getting still with yourself, asking questions, seeing things in a different light, which that's where the perspective comes in. So yeah, that's when I was able to at least shift into moving into, I wouldn't say I gained self-love then, but I would say I started the process of really finding my foundation again, returning home to myself, that peace instead of that feeling of brokenness.
So if you have had this experience, which you've had, and you were able to have the perspective and then the shift in the perspective, which I would imagine continued to shift with time. And eventually you get to a place where you can turn around and support other people in healing through their pain. And the reason I started today's episode this way was I wanted people to really be able to get knee deep into where did you come from and how are you able to so beautifully move people forward so powerfully today. And I want to give something to the audience right now they can walk away with. And that would be to ask you, if you were to go back right now, knowing what you have with that hindsight, with that shift, what would you say to your 15-year-old self 6 months before? What would be the sit-down conversation, the advice, the tips, the love or the support that you would give? And, as you give that, it could either be through somebody that's in the pain right now that's listening to these words, or somebody that knows somebody that is going through this, because we all know that, there is an increase in suicide right now in both men and in women. And in men, it's actually escalating dramatically more. And so there are so many young adults that are suffering at this moment. And I don't know if they all have somebody that they can lean on that has gone through and come out the other side as beautifully as you have. What would be those words?
I don't feel I'm an expert to talk about this when it comes to suicide. So I could only speak from what I know now and what I believe can help somebody. I think so many people, when they're depressed, they want to be alone. They want to be in dark spaces. They want to isolate. And that is the worst thing you could do for yourself. I think the most important thing to do is get around people that lift you up, that see you for you and they don't judge you for being in your pain, and just open up and be vulnerable. And I think a lot of people, when they're in this space of depression or suicide, isolation and everything, they have a hard time being vulnerable and speaking their truth of really what they're feeling. I think the most beautiful thing and the best way you could connect with somebody else is being vulnerable, being like owning your truth and being able to speak up. And I think that's when people truly connect. So there is really a beautiful thing when you're able to show up and just be able to speak your feelings with somebody that it obviously makes you feel safe, most importantly, just by being able to voice like, I'm not feeling good. I'm really feeling alone right now. I just want to share this because it's on my heart, and you don't need to fix anything, but I want somebody to be there for me and understand me and just see me for where I'm at right now. And so I just welcome anybody listening is finding somebody that you feel safe around and just sharing your heart, and cry the whole time if you need to. Just let it out, but do not isolate. Do not stay inside. I personally believe the best thing you could do is even just walk outside and be in sunshine. I think that will instantly uplift your energy. And the more you do it, the more uplifting it will be. And soon you'll feel like you could move forward, that you could step out of this and really create a new reality for yourself. So I think that's the beginning steps.
You know, you started off your response by saying that you're not an expert. And I know that, you know, if we were talking about from a career vantage point, you would not be. That's not where you spend your time. But you so beautifully articulated very simple, actionable steps that people can take. You know, we all are looking for, ultimately, at the end of the day, human to human connection. And the only way that we can ever get connection is through vulnerability. There's no other way to create connection. And if people were just to take what you said, which was identifying first that you feel a certain way, finding somebody that you can trust, creating a safe space and saying, here's how I'm feeling. But you also added not expecting them to fix it. Just tell them, share it. And then for the person that is the receiving end of it, it's not your responsibility to fix it, but it's your responsibility to maintain the safe space. And then you get to do something with that, like, you know, cry for an hour and then take your shoes off and go for a walk, as an example. Ground your feet, allow the emotion, the energy to flow. And it was just so beautifully shared. And I want to just say thank you. You share beautifully with people that, you know, you help them connect to their authentic selves. So I would say, and I want you to correct me if I'm phrasing this poorly, but you were not your authentic self well into your 20s. And then you found yourself. What was the process of finding you? And, you know, I asked the opening question, what does it really mean to find your authentic self? And this is where I would like to spend the bulk of our time, is just how are we able to find who we are? Because so many of us, I think, are just lost in the day-to-day of everything that we're doing that we don't really know. And I know that you do this.
Absolutely. And I think this is so important. So as we know, a lot of our beliefs, our patterns are formed at a very young age. And so in our adult years, we're operating based on those beliefs and those stories. And I speak from my experience. Like I said, I had this story that I was stupid, that, you know, I wasn't worthy, and I seeked so much outside of myself to validate me. And that's when I think that's where the disconnect of who you truly are is, seeking everything outside of you instead connecting what's within you. And so the reconnecting and rediscovering who you truly are, it really comes down to stripping everything that you're not. And that's those stories, those lies that you've run over and repeat, that has just been your limitation, because 95% of them aren't true. And if one of those stories are true, okay, what would you be without that story? For example, I thought I couldn't speak well, that I was stupid. So what would it look like if I didn't believe that story? And is that even true? Like, where did that come from? And I know where it came from. And it came from my learning disability. It came from not speaking well. I had a mother that was not born in the States. So the way we said certain things was just reiterating the word she said incorrectly in the English language. So it's kind of funny, actually, a story. My sister used to say patio door instead of patio door. And she didn't learn until her older years, like in her 30s, that wasn't how you said it. That was just the way my mom said it. And so we really just need to strip everything that we're not, those stories, those lies, and ask yourself, like, what would I be without this story? And really just being honest, like, where's the proof of this story? Or where could I prove it to be wrong? There's always evidence in our life. For example, not speaking well. Okay, so how did I'm just coming up with one thing. I was a host for an event, a fundraiser that was 300 people. I got up, spoke my heart. Obviously, it was received well. How was I able to do that if I don't speak well, And so just coming up with proof to debunk that belief or that story that you've carried for so long. So I think that's the most important step, is that awareness of what is limiting you and what is a story that you just have running on repeat. And a lot of it is your subconscious beliefs. So the only way to change anything is to bring it into your awareness. And so I love this saying that somebody that I interviewed, Preston Smiles, has said, you can't intervene in a world you cannot see. So we can't change anything if we can't see it. So awareness is always the foundation of any change. And so really the next step is in rediscovering yourself is reflecting and really getting to know yourself, asking questions like what it is that I truly value. When you start discovering what you value, this is really eye-opening. And this is really in dissecting it, right? Like peeling the onion of why you value it as well is super important to really ground you in that, in what's important to you. And so let's say you value family. Why do you value family? Why is that important to you? Maybe you grew up in a family that was very loving and supportive. And so you always felt that you were held and seen and understood. So that value carries on into everything you do later in life. And so when you don't feel, let's say you're in a relationship where that partner of yours is not connecting with their family, there's no relationship, there's a misalignment because that's so valuable to you. And so you feel like something's not right, something feels off. So knowing your values, getting very crystal clear, I think there's such power in journaling because you're able to put everything on paper and then see it and be able to process it. So when we take things out of our mind and actually be able to put it on paper, we could look at it through a different lens. And I think that's really important. And then, of course, I think, reflecting is also asking yourself, like, how am I showing up in the world? Do I like how I'm showing up in the world? And you have to be radically honest with yourself. This is not about shaming yourself, hating yourself. It's all about just being real and being honest and being able to accept, like, okay, this is who you are today. That doesn't mean you need to stay here, but accepting, okay, this is, I notice I'm showing up in this way. I don't like it. Okay, so now how am I going to change it? Because you have the power to change your future as long as you take radical ownership of it. And so I'll just leave you with that. Those are like the two beginning steps for sure to start the rediscovering who you are.
So how would somebody identify that they are not their authentic self or that they're not living their authentic self?
Something just feels off. Something you don't feel fulfilled. You feel like there's just a lack of spark in your life. You feel heaviness. You just can't really put your finger on what it is, but there's just a lack of luster in your life. You don't want to go out as much. And I'm a total homebody, but I love being by myself. I love peace. I love quiet, but it's a different energy when you're like, I'm just not feeling good about myself. And so I'm going to stay inside. So you could feel that energy. There's a different energy and maybe you can't put your finger on it, but there's just something off. And I think when you're able to bring that awareness, you could really understand, like, oh, okay, something doesn't feel right. So yes, awareness to that energy that you're feeling.
I want to touch on something you said a moment ago, because I think we're layering a beautiful cake here for people. And when I say layering a cake, I just mean adding more information on top of information until they have the whole piece. And, you spoke about the same present with a different bow, and being able to identify that you are at the center of what I would say were all of your, misbeliefs or your problems. And then having to take ownership of where you were, what you were doing that was putting you there. And I think that that's a very necessary part of the process in also identifying who you are and what your authentic self is taking accountability for all the actions or the behaviors or the patterns that you are privy to, or at least participating in. And so what was that process like for you in turning around and taking radical ownership, as you said, of, I am always at the center of every one of these relationships. I'm not the one that's changing. The relationships come in, they come out, but they seem to be the same. So what was that process like, and how could you support somebody through identifying that's where they are and then giving us your tips or hacks to get out of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest things that changed my life was taking radical responsibility for my part I played in my misery, as I mentioned. That was literally life-changing because now I had the power to change how I show up in the future and where my life leads. And I think a lot of people could feel like it's overwhelming to feel you are responsible for the misery you created in your life. But it's also, on the flip side, very empowering, because then you now have the power to change that when you know how you're showing up in your life. And so when that happened, I got really clear, like, okay, let's say, I'm trying to give an example. I was attracting these people. It would come on hot and cold. And I wanted to know why that was happening. And so I started to question, like, how I was showing up. What was I doing? How was I reacting, acting, whichever. And so I started to notice number one, wasn't respecting myself, wasn't holding healthy boundaries. I was pursuing, which is very masculine. I started really noticing all those behaviors of how I was showing up. And then I started to question why I was showing up that way. And it always came from a belief. Right? So we have to really dissect, like, why we're showing up some way and where is that stemming from. And once you have that clarity, then you could change into a new belief. And so it really, the questions I started asking myself, as I mentioned, was, what do I value? I started asking myself also, what brings me joy? What lights me up? This is really the self-discovery, is what makes you come alive. Most importantly, it doesn't have to be somebody else's list, right? This is really getting to know what is the life force for you. And for me, it's being in nature, going on walks, being in sunshine, doing an adventure, traveling, reading on the beach, the simple things. Like, write down every single thing that makes you come alive, that makes you feel light, that makes you feel at peace. And I think that really helped me move into being who I was and showing up and appreciating everything that I was. And I think this is a lifelong journey, is really continuously returning home to yourself, because we are in such a busy world that we get so distracted by everything we must do and everything everybody else is doing, especially because social media, we see everybody's doing all this. And then we're like, oh shit, I'm not doing this. But that's why I think it's a constant journey, is returning home, creating that space and that time to really reflect on, what do you need? Asking yourself, like, what do I want right now? What would fill up my cup? What would bring me more peace? And I'm in this season of my life that I'm really constantly doing that as well. Like, I'm not pressuring myself to need to post all the time on social media. I'm really honoring when there's tension, I choose to remove myself and then find my breath again and release and shake off anything that is not feeling good to me. And so I'm in this space of returning back to peace and really honoring that. And I think that really should be everybody's goal, is how could I just be feeling good in my own skin, basically? Like, how could I continuously feel embodied, aligned, and at peace? And so I think that it's most important is asking ourselves questions so that we could really get to know and become very clear on what feels good to us.
You've given 3 incredibly powerful exercises for people to apply into their life today to create profound shift. And, our audience is 50-50 men and women. And I don't want either party to discredit anything you've said because, they're hearing it from a powerful female versus from a powerful male and saying, well, that's for women versus that's for men. And you mentioned journaling. And I've mentioned this previously on the podcast. I want to mention it again for anyone that hasn't heard the episode. There was a study done where they polled 100 self-made billionaires and millionaires and asked them what are the things that they do that set them up to be successful. There was only one thing they all had in common. Some woke up early, some slept in, some, did this and some did that, but every single one of them journaled. The majority of those people were men. And so men say all the time, oh, I don't journal. Journaling is about taking the thoughts in the mind and putting them out on the paper, creating separation space between you and what you're thinking and feeling so that you can have a different vantage point. You mentioned asking better questions. When you ask better questions, what am I doing? Why am I doing that? What's the pattern? Where can I take accountability? You're drawing additional information. You're empowering your brain to look at 10 million bits of data versus the 50 bits you've been focused on. When you have more information, you can make better decisions. The last one was, what brings me joy? I wrote them down and I circled each one of those because it's so simple, and yet we can get so caught up in the day-to-day minutia of what we're doing, we don't focus in on what's required. What brings you joy? And if you focus on the things that bring you joy, it's going to completely shift anything and everything in your life. I hope every single person takes what you've just so beautifully articulated today and applies it into their life. Now I want to go back again because we're layering this cake very intentionally, because I know at least 3 people that guaranteed want to hear the answer to this question. And I would imagine there's going to be millions more. My question is, if you were to come across somebody and they said to you, I am desperately looking for love. I want someone to love me. I am lonely, and they could be 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, but they have never found that elusive person. I know that you are so beautifully engaged right now. You're busy planning your wedding. We look at where you had put your value and now where your value is. There was a transition from who you used to be, and you had said it yourself. There was an urgency behind you and how you approached relationships and dating and what you wanted. And now you have fallen in love with you and created the space for somebody to come into your life that meets and matches the energy that you're putting out into the world. And I think everyone listening wants that. And so what would be the advice that you would give to somebody who was wanting to fall in love?
It's such a beautiful question. I think a lot of people of us seek this because we're meant to be connected with others in relationship. So the most important thing is, if you seek love and intimacy and you don't have it for yourself, you cannot maintain that. It is virtually impossible, I believe. I believe every relationship will break if you don't have, or you will attract a very unhealthy relationship. I could definitely say that. So I believe relationships are always a mirror. It's to show you where you are not meeting yourself. And so most importantly, I think so many of us write down a list of like all those things you want in a partner. And, you could look at that. But I think if you turn the mirror back on yourself, because I think that's, again, we should always turn the mirror back on ourselves. Ask yourself, am I being those qualities that I seek in another? If the answer is no, then you need to become that person. If that's what you want and desire, you need to become it first. And so let's say respect, for example, you want a partner that respects you. Are you respecting yourself? You want a partner that's honest and has integrity. Are you honest? And do you have integrity? Do you keep your word? You want somebody that's active, that's taking care of their body, that's healthy. Okay. Are you active, taking care of your body? Are you healthy? Do you feel healthy and confident in your body? If not, start working out, start eating right. You need to start becoming the person you wish to meet. And that doesn't mean becoming something that you're not. But if you seek it, it's already within you. And so it's really tapping into and cultivating that within yourself that you seek. And so that, I think, is the most powerful question you could ask yourself. Okay, am I being the person I wish to attract? And then ask yourself, why not? And again, I always go back to this, like peeling the onion, really understanding so that it drives you more for why you want that thing. And when you have that strong, powerful why, it compels you to seek it then. And it will then drive you into action and really creating a change. And so that, I think, is the most important place to start. I'm happy to go more deeper into that because, like I said, it's one of my deepest pains, and I am now in a healthy, secure relationship. For anybody that knows attachment theory, I think it's very, very wise to learn what is your attachment style, and also, if you're in a relationship, what is their attachment style. This really helps you deeply understand yourself, of why you seek certain things, certain relationships, certain patterns. Again, it always stems from our past. And so once you're able to understand that, then with that awareness, you could then change and change the reality of your living today, So I think that's really important. So being in now a secure, healthy relationship, it took time to get here. I mean, it took me doing the work. It took me really taking ownership of my life and also being with somebody that seeks the same, that's going to take responsibility, that's going to be accountable, that's going to apologize when he's wrong, that's going to forgive. I think it's always a mirror. And so if you seek a secure, healthy relationship, it starts with you. That's really period. End of story.
So I love that, you've taken us on this journey, and I want you to go a little deeper for us because you've left us on the edge of a cliff there about our attachment style. And I want to ground something for a moment. You were going on this journey and you said it took a while. And if I were to ask you a question, and I know this is a really stupid question because I know the answer to the question, but was it worth it doing the work so that you could get the reward of the relationship you're in?
Always. I think growth is life. I think there's a reason why we go through what we go through. It's all about learning our lessons, though. When we go through something and we don't learn it and we repeat the same thing, it's just going to get louder and louder, and it's still going to keep showing up. And so until we learn the lesson, that is when we're able to evolve. So I went through a lot of deep pain, a lot of heartbreak, but I was partly the reason for that heartbreak. Let's be real. If not 100% responsible for it. It really came down to how I saw myself and repeating these behaviors or patterns that stemmed from something and thinking I'm going to get a different result. And so it really comes to shifting out of those behaviors and those patterns that you have on repeat. And I actually recently learned about attachment theory, and it's quite fascinating when you actually start to really discover where you sit. Like, for example, I know I had, anxiety attachment, or what is it called? I'm blanking right now. That's what I had in my relationships. And now I know I have a secure attachment style. And so that's the ultimate goal. But the only way to get there is really questioning things and asking and being honest with yourself and not shaming yourself for the mistakes or the failures, and really just coming to a place of acceptance. And I always share, this is a big thing that I love to share because, as you mentioned at the top of the episode, we're talking about self-love. I believe self-acceptance is a pathway to self-love. If we don't truly accept the totality that has brought us here, we'll never be able to get to this place where we truly love ourselves, because there's always this void. There's always this rejection of self or the shame that we feel because we haven't accepted what has brought us here. And I think once you make peace to everything that you've been through and being able to be like, okay, I accept that this is where I'm at today, but that doesn't mean I get to stay here. Now I get to make different choices. I need to be now conscious and aware of how I cannot repeat this pattern and how I can make a different choice going forward. And so I think that's really key to getting to a place that you want to be, is just accepting everything that has brought you here.
If you were going to give somebody advice right now of falling in love with themselves, accepting themselves, but there was a physical act that you would have them do to create that process, what would be that advice?
I think one thing that's really important, and I heard this once on a podcast that I really, really related to, is also this self-discipline. I think it's so easy to not do the things we think we need to do. And I think the most important thing is being actually very disciplined with ourselves, or devoted, I think is another great word for the females out there, because sometimes discipline sounds very masculine, but devotion, be devoted to yourself. And what does that look like is when you say you're going to do something, do it. The more you do it, the better you'll get. So you'll gain competence. And then from there, the cycle continues from you keep saying what you're going to do, which is credibility. You are being credible to yourself and others. you'll develop more competence and then more confidence. And so also, I love to say that self-worth is the foundation and confidence is the house you build on top of that foundation. And so we need to have both, but self-confidence is usually an external thing by doing things. The self-worth is the internal work, the questions, that building the credibility, keeping your word. And so most importantly, I think is starting there is, to change anything, you need to, number one, have a different perspective about it. You need to change your thoughts and emotions about it, and then change your actions. And so I think the first place to start is really being accountable. If you desire a fit, healthy body, what does a fit, healthy body person do? How do they wake up? What meals do they eat? What does their day look like? What is their sleep patterns? Just really start to question those actions somebody takes, and then now implement it into your life and be really accountable with your word, and what you say you're going to do it.
So beautiful. I will often share with people that are aspiring to have or to be or to do something to look for somebody that has already achieved what they most want. And I refer to that in my business as expanders. And so if I look at your loving relationship that you have right now, you are an expander for anyone that's listening to this who is not in a place where they love themselves, or they haven't connected to their authentic self yet. They haven't fallen in love yet. They haven't taken accountability for who they are, where they are, what they're doing. And then to be able to do the work and then to attract the loving relationship, the committed relationship. For anybody who's watching this on YouTube, her face lit up the moment we mentioned that she's engaged and getting married. And that's what we want, right? So make sure you head over to YouTube and watch this, because you'll get to see the moment. But it speaks into beautifully the transition and the change that comes from having already done the work. And so I challenge people, when you're in that place where you want to go, is to find somebody that's already done it, see what it is that they've done, and can you emulate what they've done. You beautifully shared, that we need to be able to create the shift. And again, I wrote so many notes. Am I being the person that I want to attract? And so often my advice would be, if you're looking for love, where could you start to love yourself? Where could you create a practice of self-love? And when I say self-love, it could be anything like going and getting your nails done, getting your hair done, going for a massage, going for a walk, reading a book. I often challenge people to go and take themselves on a date. Very rarely will someone take themselves out to a movie, out for a nice meal by themselves, go and read a book, sit in a bookstore. I remember single Rudi would go to Barnes & Noble and would sit with a, coffee somewhere in one of the little lounges in a Barnes & Noble. And that would be a date for me. I was attracting a person that would be, into the things that I'm into, which is reading and studying and learning and self-development. And that is 100% the relationship I have today. But I also believe I became what I was most attracting into my life. And so I love that you shared that.
Yeah, can I add to that? Because I think this is important, or I think this is a great thing that I challenge anybody listening to do. For somebody that struggles to be alone with themselves, because there's a lot of people out there that I think don't like their own space and their time with themselves. I challenge you to actually take yourself on a vacation. A solo vacation, I think, is very liberating. And this is a great way also to discover yourself, because you're going to do what you want to do, not what your partner wants to do, not what your friends want to do. You're going to do and schedule and take time to do what you want to do. And so that's a great way to discover what you like, what you love. And also, I think it's absolutely critical that you start to love your own company. There's such a beauty in being with yourself and really just finding joy in that. And so I challenge anybody to go on a solo vacation and just let your light shine and do what you love. And then really you'll start to discover what brings you joy. So my suggestion.
I have never realized it until you just said that. Prior to me meeting Aniston, I was in a work environment where I would have to travel, internationally frequently, but I would often go 3, 4, 5 days early and spend a few days in Rome or a few days in Venice or wherever I was, and just being by myself, choosing that time. And I never one time looked at that as I was vacationing by myself. But the truth is that was where I was the most contemplative, because like you said, it was times I did what I wanted to do. Do I want to get up and go and get gelato right now? Do I want to go on a tour? Do I want to go to the Vatican or wherever I went? And I think that's beautiful. I'm going to get so many people to listen to that episode and make sure that they start to take that advice for themselves. And if you are in a place where you've heard anything in this episode today, as the audience listens, and you find that you're challenging yourself, you're in a relationship, maybe, you don't feel like you're as committed, or the person isn't as committed. There's so much value. This isn't just about somebody wanting to fall in love. But I think the process of falling in love with yourself is the most important thing that you can do, regardless of where you find yourself in life, which is why I was so excited about having you on the episode today, Erica. I would love to ask you one closing question as we bring this episode to a close. And at the end of that, I would also love for you just to share a little bit of how people can find you and different ways of people can work with you. I know you have the Reignite Your Light coaching program for women. Speaking into a little bit of how you can support them. We're absolutely going to attach everything in the show notes for our audience to easily be able to find you, to click on Instagram and so on to follow you. But I would love to know, what is one book that you have read that just absolutely deeply and profoundly shifted your way of being?
There's so many. I have a whole bookshelf and they're mostly personal development books, because that's what I love. I'm all about the nonfiction books. So if I could bring myself back to my most favorite book, there's so many. Can I leave like 2? No, can I leave 3? Because I love books, and I'm all about sharing what has really impacted me, however it could help others. Okay. So first I'm going to say, I'm trying to remember the exact title. I'll come back to this one, but I'm going to say The Magic of Surrender, which is by Kurt Blackson. I love this book because, number one, when I read it and when I interviewed him, it was exactly what I needed to hear. But it's very hard to get in a place of surrender. But when you read this book, it will really help you want to surrender more, like surrender to the magic that is unfolding in your life. And so that was really, really impactful for me. The other one was The Knowing by the Wayne Dyer daughters. I loved this book. It was very practical to read, but I needed it when I read it. And this was when my dog passed away. And they share very much how Dr. Wayne Dyer passed away and the gifts that came along that they discovered in their life. And it really helped, again, see the beauty in life and surrendering to it all and releasing, grieving, and just allowing gifts to come into your life. And so it was a beautiful read, and it's exactly what I needed then. It really helped me. Both those books really helped me when I was grieving the greatest love of my life, which was my dog at this time, to be honest. And then the other one, and I'm trying to remember, it's called The Warrior Woman, I think. I have to look that up. I actually will, maybe I'll tell you once I find it, because I have it on my bookshelf. It's by Heather Ash Amara. She has a few different books, and she teaches the Toltec wisdom, which is the same type of wisdom shared by Don Miguel Ruiz, the 4 Agreements. And so she carries that Toltec wisdom forward as well. And again, it was another book that really served me when I was just not feeling in joy and I was not feeling connected to who I was. And I happened to read this book. Sorry, long answer. I happened to read this book when I was in Bali on a trip alone. And I was just relishing in it. I really connected with it, and it helped me just rediscover parts of myself that I was shaming away. And so those are my 3 books.
I'm going to add the 4th, which was what you just mentioned, the 4 Agreements. Just incredible books, all of them. I love asking that question because I think that people listening to the podcast are always looking for something good and wanting to know what was the shift or the change. And there's so many valuable nuggets that come out of it. I do believe we are the totality of all our experiences, which also includes some of the books that we read which shorten or lessen people's pain. Thank you so much for graciously spending your time with us today. How can people best find you and best work with you?
Such an honor, Rudi. Thank you for holding this space and your wonderful questions. It really helped uncover all the ways that we could really connect to ourselves and live in abundance and alignment. So thank you for your wonderful questions. Live mostly on Instagram, so at Erica Lippy, and the Reignite Your Light course is going to be coming up, I believe, at the top of the year. So I'm working on it right now. I'm really trying to just make it something that this will be my signature program. And I really feel it will radically change women's lives. It's specifically for women, but I know that a lot of the tools in there will help men as well. So I'll be sharing a lot coming soon about that, but I'm super excited for what it will help in other women, really creating that light and shining it onto the world in passion and purpose.
You are just an incredible human being. I love you so much. I just love how you show up out in the world. I love more than anything to see how successful you are in love and in life. And also then being able to take what was your pain and turning it into your purpose and your passion so that you can help heal other people. Make sure you go and check out Erica Lippy on Instagram. Also the Passion, Love, Pursue podcast. It is phenomenal. She asks incredible questions. And I hope that you today fell in love with yourself just a little more as you listen to these incredible words between the two of us. Thank you for joining us on the Empowered Life podcast. We love you and we'll catch you in the next episode. Till then, bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.